In early 2026, Russia gathered tens of thousands of soldiers for a massive spring offensive. The objective was straightforward: mass enough infantry and armor to finally crush Ukrainian resistance in the Donbas region. Standing in their way was the Donbas Fortress Belt. This 31-mile string of heavily fortified cities and settlements has been the anchor of Ukrainian defense since hostilities first began in 2014. The Russian strategy to break this line relied entirely on overwhelming manpower, but throwing waves of infantry at a decade-old defensive network yielded terrible results. In March 2026 alone, Russia suffered over 35,000 casualties trying to crack the belt. This map of the Donbas region shows the frontline movement for the spring. Instead of breaking through, we see the Russian advance collapse entirely. By the end of April, Ukraine had outpaced Russia, marking the Kremlin's first net territorial loss since August 2024. The stalled offensive at the front is the direct result of a battlefield that has expanded far beyond the trenches. The problems for the advancing forces start with the environment. The spring of 2026 brought heavy rains and a rapid thaw, creating a deep, soupy mud known as the Rasputitsa. This terrain completely bogs down heavy tanks and armored vehicles, stripping the infantry of their mobile fire support. Unable to move their modern mechanized units effectively, Russian commanders have been forced to pull decades-old relics out of deep storage. Troops are heading into combat with outdated armor from the early 1960s that breaks down easily in the mud and offers almost no protection against modern anti-tank weapons. With Russian armor trapped, Ukraine implemented a strategy called active defense. Rather than meeting assaults head-on, they introduced a new generation of mid-range drones, like the FP2. These unmanned aircraft fly up to 90 miles behind the front lines to destroy the supply trucks, ammo dumps, and command posts trying to feed the Russian offensive. This deep strike capability caught Russian logistics completely off guard. On April 29th, Ukrainian drones zeroed in on an airstrip in Voronezh, nearly 100 miles from the front. They struck during a routine refueling stop, taking out a transport chopper and an Mi-28 gunship, multi-million-dollar assets Russia desperately needs to move troops and provide close air support. By neutralizing high-value targets in the near rear, Ukraine starves the forces actively fighting in the trenches. The soldiers ordered to charge the fortress belt are left with ammunition, air cover, or a working radio network to call for help. Penetrating 90 miles into hostile territory requires neutralizing Russia's dense network of air defenses. This is a view of a standard SAM system, part of a quiet, systematic hunting campaign. For over a year, Ukraine prioritized finding and destroying Russian radar stations and anti-aircraft weapons. In April 2026 alone, Ukrainian forces eliminated 25 distinct surface-to-air missile systems, ripping massive holes in that protective shield. At the same time, long-range strikes hit the factories inside Russia that manufacture the interceptor missiles for these systems. Even when a launcher survives, Russian commanders are finding they simply do not have the ammunition to shoot down the incoming Ukrainian drones. Without enough launchers or the missiles to arm them, the Kremlin is forced to leave certain airspace completely unguarded. Ukraine uses these gaps to establish safe aerial corridors, blinding Russia's ability to defend its own rear and allowing drone swarms to fly straight through. And once those corridors were open, Ukraine pushed the boundaries of the war even further. This map tracks the radius of Ukrainian drone strikes, extending over 1,000 miles deep into the Russian interior. In a single month, Ukraine launched a record-breaking 7,300 drones, vastly outnumbering the projectiles Russia fired in return. These swarms bypassed the front line entirely to target the foundation of the Russian economy. Drones struck major oil refineries in places like Perm and Tuapse, cutting into the crude oil revenues that fund the invasion. They also hit the Shagel Air Base in Chelyabinsk, damaging elite Su-57 fighter jets parked 1,000 miles from the fighting. Now, Ukraine is moving into the next phase of deep strike capability with the FP9. This homegrown ballistic missile carries an 1,800-pound warhead and flies fast enough to evade whatever air defenses Russia still has operating around Moscow. Geographical distance no longer offers the Kremlin protection, as the kill zone has reached into the industrial hubs keeping the military afloat. All of these battlefield realities converge on May 9th in Red Square. Historically, Russia's Victory Day parade is the country's most vital projection of military strength. a highly choreographed display of heavy armor and missile systems rolling past the Kremlin. But in 2026, the spectacle collapsed. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, the sprawling columns of tanks, self-propelled artillery, and intercontinental ballistic missiles were completely absent from the streets of Moscow. The modern armor that normally anchors the broadcast is either burning in the Donbas mud or kept hidden to avoid being spotted by Ukrainian long-range drones. The anxiety reached the very top. In the days leading up to the event, Vladimir Putin desperately lobbied international leaders to secure a temporary ceasefire just so he could hold his parade safely. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky flatly refused to grant a tactical ceasefire. The 2026 spring offensive failed because Ukraine dismantled the logistical network required to wage war, leaving the Russian front line unsupported and its highest military parade marching